This episode of Access to the Arts has been made possible through the support of First Bank Richmond, with 8 locations in Wayne County to serve you. First Bank Richmond and you, doing great things together. Hi, I'm Eric. Welcome to this month's Access to the Arts. We've got a great show for you. Steve Bonwig is going to talk to Forrest Tobey from Earlham College about his history in playing. We'll also hear a little bit from him. I'm going to have a conversation with Sean Dingworth about the annual Pottery Palooza taking place in September, and we'll hear from the Richmond Community Orchestra. Welcome to Access to the Arts. In June, the Richmond Community Orchestra had a performance on Roosevelt Hill in Glen Miller Park. Maybe you've seen that performance on WCTV. If you haven't, here's a selection of that performance.
It asks us to dream bigger. An idea is better shared. It ignites us. And we make each other bright. We can do great things together.
It's a whole new way to watch the WCTV family of stations. Live, local broadcast television anytime, on any device, including your phone, computer, or television. Whether you're on the couch or on the go, simply launch the local BTV app and you'll instantly be able to watch all 3 of our channels, WCTV, WETV, and WGTV. Go to localbtv.com or download the free Local BTV app for your iPhone, Android, Roku, Apple TV, or Fire TV. Watch what's happening in our community on Whitewater Community Television.
Welcome back to Access to the Arts. I'm Stephen Bonweg and have the opportunity to spend some time with Forrest Tobey, the professor of music and also the music director at Earlham College and the Earlham College Orchestra. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm always fascinated by where people began, where their calling for their careers began. And I know you were born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in New Jersey.
Raised outside New York City.
When did you first realize that music was going to be that career calling that you had?
Career is hard to say. I think that took a while, but just the emotional involvement with music has been with me as long as I can remember. I mean, my dad was an amateur piano player. I actually have 4 older brothers, and none of them had any music. And I'm the one that toddled up at 5-year-olds and watched my dad play. And, by the time I was 9, I was playing Bach. And so I was just, involved in classical music from an early age as a piano player. And then, I grew up in the 60s and early 70s. So I also got involved in popular music and jazz and learned to play guitar and sang. So I had kind of this classical side and this kind of folk rock side of my background. And then maybe late teens, early 20s, I didn't just want to be somebody who read music, so I dedicated myself to learning to be a jazz piano player as well. So I've mixed these things together. And then later on, I also, when I was young, I really enjoyed progressive rock of that era, Yes, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and King Crimson, and all those bands. And those guys had all these stacks of synthesizers, right, on the stage. I would see these guys live. So I always had a fascination with synthesizers. So early 90s, I started to get more involved in electronic music as well.
How many instruments do you play?
Well, I play the piano, and then I play guitar, kind of folk style. Yeah. And I play other instruments, but only in the shower, I play instruments enough to work with the orchestra.
Yes. Right. Let's fast forward a little bit. Obviously, you're now ingrained in our community and at Earlham College.
Just finished my 20th year.
Wow. How did that happen? How did you end up here in our community?
I went to Peabody Conservatory for my advanced work in orchestral conducting. So I stayed around the DC area for a good, from 1990 to the early part of the 20th century. And I was just freelancing around Washington, D.C. I had a church job, and I taught piano, and I gigged around the area. And then I finally realized, there's these things called jobs. You could just get like one job. So I said, no, it's time. I'm just going to apply for schools all over the world. Not all over the world, but all over the U.S. And Earlham was the one that just sparked in 2003. And I, frankly, had not heard of it. And moving to the Midwest was frightening, but it's all worked out. Yeah. And I really liked the college immediately when I got there. The Quaker roots of the college kind of spoke to me, and the fact that I could be kind of an eclectic musician there also spoke to sort of who I am. So it's been a real nice relationship last 20 years.
Let's talk about your performance at the Reed Center. I was lucky enough to catch that performance, the historic Reed Center. It's obviously been around since 1906. At the Reed Center is a Star Grand piano, the only one known in existence.
That's my understanding, right.
That's right. What was built in 1905. One of the key moments, I think, of your performance at the Reed Center was, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it, you said, you have to pick music that fits the instruments. And I was fascinated by that statement. And so your music choices were actually geared towards...
I did pick the repertoire for that particular recital as opposed to other. If I was to give a recital on the 9-foot concert, Steinway Concert Ground at Earlham, I would play a different type of music. But it's because the action is old, the hammers are old, it's kind of floppy. I mean, it's an historic instrument. I think I said this in the recital. My joke is, every summer we got these antique cars, right, that come through Richmond. It's wonderful, but you wouldn't take them on the Indianapolis 500, right? Yeah. They have a certain thing. So an old piano like this, you have to treat it nicely. Basically what it is, I pick things with a lighter touch. That doesn't involve a heavy bass like Chopin or Brahms or something. That's just lighter. And also the Star piano was really designed to be pianos that are for the home, not for the concert hall. So I picked pieces that might be played by amateurs in the home. Grieg lyric pieces, one of the lighter Beethoven sonatas, that just kind of fit the instrument.
The choices that you performed at the Reed Center are completely different than some of the music that you perform elsewhere. Let's travel about maybe 7,500 miles around the earth and end up in India. And you spent some time over there, and that time in India had a large impact on the music that you play today as well.
I really divide my life between before India and after India. My wife and I met in out in the Pacific Northwest in Bellingham, Washington, and we were musical partners. We still are musical partners, and we just decided we wanted to just get out of the United States for a while. And I had I had a public school certificate for teaching music. So that enabled me to apply to schools all over the world to teach at international schools. And I was offered 5 or 6 jobs, but then this one just came up in India. And I've always been fascinated by India. I've had a connection to sort of Indian philosophy. I grew up with the Beatles playing the sitar, George Harrison playing the sitar. And so when I went to India, I studied the sitar and learned a lot more about Indian classical music. So we were there for 3 years, living in the foothills of the Himalayas. It was an amazing experience. A place called the Woodstock School, which has been around since 1847, and just an amazing, amazing international community with students from like 50 countries all gathered together at this amazing little school.
And some of that music, at least I get the impression, some of that music that you were impressed with in India ended up actually on a couple of your albums. A lot of people don't know that you actually have released a couple albums.
Yeah. There's we call the group Off Chance, CHANTS. And what happened is in the 90s, we went from living in the foothills of the Himalayas to living in downtown Baltimore.
Okay.
that was a real change.
Big difference.
And but we had met some fellow musicians when we were at the Woodstock School in Mussoorie, India. And they ended up resettling in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, not far from Baltimore. And they were trained, even though they're Westerners, they were trained in Indian classical music. So we established a relationship where we put together Indian classical music and jazz, and we released an album called Off Chance, Dancing Down the Dawn. It's on Spotify and everywhere else.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I are finishing up another Off Chance recording, literally right now, that's going to be called River Songs.
Nice.
And it also involves, it's kind of a mixture of folk and Indian classical and jazz. It's hard to find labels for music often. And we're still trying to figure out what to call it. Indie, folk, jazz. How do you label the music? Right?
Yeah. And I think that really today, there's no such thing as just one genre of music.
No, not at all. Right.
Let's talk briefly about you actually had a performance at Times Square.
Boy, that's a hard one to explain in a few minutes. But when I was at Peabody, this would have been all through the 1990s, I went to Peabody to study, to get advanced training in orchestral conducting. That's my main gig at Earlham, is conducting the orchestra. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of members of the RSO over these years, which has been wonderful. But Peabody, on the top floor of the conservatory, had an electronic music studio. And this is where, this is an opportunity for me to also get some electronic music training. So I ended up getting a second master's while I was there in electronic music performance. And we came across a device by Don Buchla, and someone might know that name. He was one of the great inventors of synthesizers in Berkeley, California. He's sort of the West Coast synthesis school, as opposed to Bob Moog, who's better known, who was the East Coast synthesis school of making music. So the Buchla Lightning were these two wands that you held in your hand. They emitted infrared light, and there were sensors out there. And you were just able to create music in space. And so I wrote numbers of pieces of music where I'm on an empty stage, but you can play flutes and you can play drums, and it was just very, very exciting time. So it just so happened that this Peabody was connected to Johns Hopkins University. The head of the board of Johns Hopkins University happened to be Bloomberg before he became mayor of New York. And so Bloomberg saw me perform, and he thought it was interesting. He got Peabody connected up with the Times Square people. So lo and behold, 7 in the morning in New York, when the first turn of the millennium was happening in Australia. That was the first time January 1st, 2000 came to be. I did a thing with the lightning and performed in the middle of Times Square, and it got lost in the craziness of the Y2K experience, but it was tremendous fun.
Real quickly before we wrap up, if I were to get in Forrest Tobey's car, and what would we be listening to? What do you obviously your tastes are kind of all over the place, and that's what I love about it, but what are you listening to right now?
That's interesting. I mean, actually, to be honest, it wouldn't be in the car, because when I'm in the car, it's a chance not to listen to music, and I listen to like books on tape.
Okay.
Right now we're listening to the cuts of our own recording, because when we mix our music that we're making, you mix it in a nice studio with beautiful speakers, but then you've got to bring it to the location where people actually listen to the music. We listen in the car. But otherwise, maybe the way to answer the question is, what's your Spotify playlist?
Yeah.
And it's all over the map.
I would imagine.
It's all over the map.
Forrest Tobey, the professor of music and also the music director at the Earlham College Orchestra. Thank you for your time. Thank you for visiting Access to the Arts.
Pleasure. Thank you.
exploration into the world of the unknown. It moves us to change, to grow. It asks us to dream bigger. An idea is better shared. It ignites us, and we make each other bright. We can do great things together.
WCTV supports local entertainment. WCTV supports local information. WCTV supports our local students. WCTV needs your support to continue supporting our community, and it's easy to do. Become a member as an individual or family. Nonprofit and business memberships are also available, with benefits including video production and program sponsorship. Membership donations are critical, and when deciding where your support dollars go, support an organization that serves the community you live in. Visit WCTV.info or call 765-973-8488.
Welcome back to Access to the Arts. We're having a chance to spend a little time with Sean Dingworth, Executive Director of the Richmond Art Museum for 25 years. And the Art Museum's been open for 125 years. That's special.
Yes, it is. We're very excited. It's a great year, and we're having fun celebrating it.
Cool. Talk a little bit about an annual event that really has taken over the front lawn of RAM and creeps over into the front lawn of the high school. Pottery Palooza is coming up in September. Talk about that event.
Yeah, so September 9th. So it is the only juried art fair that is dedicated to ceramists and potters. So we invite some of the best potters from Indiana and Ohio to set up, as you say, on the front lawn of the museum, front lawn of the high school, and it's free to the public. We get about 800 people come and buy pottery, a variety of artists that do different styles, everything from sort of fine art pieces to functional pieces. And the great thing about pottery is it's extremely affordable.
One of the things that I had a chance to do last year was sit down and really talk to some of the potters. They really focus, some of them, on the functionality of it. That really seems to draw people. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, it does. Last year I had some requests for some more fine art pieces, but no, we find that people come year after year. They kind of look for the same potters. They add, more bowls to their sets or more coffee mugs to their sets, or they want more platters. I think that's what's great, is it's art, but it's also functional. And so people love that versatility that pottery affords.
You have music, demonstrations. Talk about what you think continues to bring people back to enjoy this particular show.
Sure. Well, again, it's free. It's so accessible. It's easy to walk. All the booths are set up towards the sidewalks, so it's very accessible for all abilities, for people to be able to shop. The music's fantastic. That's provided by the Richmond Symphony Orchestra. You have the ability to go into the museum, see the museum exhibitions as well. So we have all the facilities available. We also have food. I think for people that are looking for just pottery, a lot of art fairs include all types of mediums, but for people who are really into pottery, it's all right there. So it's easy to shop.
What was the thought process behind starting this? Because we talked about,
you've
got 25 years in, the museum has 125 years, but this show isn't that old.
No. So one of the things we always do at RAM is kind of look at our history and then try to do something that's relevant to today. So this region, and the Ohio region, has an incredible history of pottery. So if we look at the Overbeck's histories, but even contemporary, when we look at people like Alan Patrick and John Peterson, Byron Temple from Centerville, and Scott Schaefer from Centerville. So what we wanted to do was sort of take something that was historically noted, but bring it into the present. Give the artists who live in the region today the opportunity to show their work.
And they do it, and they do very well. You mentioned 800 people. They start what time?
10 a.m., 10 to 3.
Okay. Sean, thank you very much for the time. Looking forward to Pottery Palooza again this year. Maybe you'll let me set up on the grass again.
Anytime.
All right. Thanks to everyone who participated in this show. Thank you for watching this month's Access to the Arts on Whitewater Community Television's WETV Channel 20. As always, I wish you well. This episode of Access to the Arts has been made possible through the support of First Bank Richmond, with 8 locations in Wayne County to serve you. First Bank Richmond and you, doing great things together.